We are here at the Long Beach Sunnyside Cemetery and Municipal Cemetery for the 27th annual cemetery tour put on by the incredible folks at the Long Beach Historical Society. People like me who grew up in Long Beach, we see street names and building names and we understand that there's stories and people behind some of those names, but we don't always get a chance to know what they are. And today we have an incredible group of actors who are going to tell some of those stories that are funny and heartwarming and really important to the history of our city. So tune in now to see one of those stories happen.
Welcome to the Harnett Family plot. I'm Ernest Thomas Harnett. People know me as Tom. These are my sisters, Ivy and Jane. We're 3 of 14 siblings. Jane, whom we all called Bessie, is the oldest. I'm about 2 years behind her. The first 9 children were born in England.
Ivy was the second Harnett child born in America, followed by a sister and a brother.
We're spread out over the years. Bessie was 24 when Frank, our parents' last child, was born in 1897.
Our parents are Ernest and Julia Harnett. Father was a gentleman farmer back in England, but after a few years of devastating losses, they decided to move to California.
One of Father's former employees had moved to Southern California and wrote glowingly of a place that did not allow alcohol, had a religious settlement, rich soil, and plenty of potential.
It was Long Beach. Our parents moved here in 1889, and by 1890, they owned a 5-acre ranch with a house large enough for our big family. It was on 25th and Atlantic, not far from here.
And that's where Ivy was born. We like to say our parents named her Ivy because they knew she'd cling to the house.
We were surrounded by farms, fields of flowers, fruit, and vegetables stretched over and beyond Signal Hill. Imagine, you're sitting with these people. There's no street noise. No buildings, just the birds and the trees, and us talking about our lives on the Pacific Squab and Poultry Farm.
It had 5 acres, 2,000 chickens, 10 cows, 12 pigs, and 5,000 pigeons. Oh, and a horse.
And Father had a large and thriving garden. Most of what we grew we used ourselves, and the rest we'd sell or trade with neighbors.
We sold the pigeons to the fancy restaurants. They called them squab on the menu. A bit swankier than pigeons. Eventually, Father decided to sell the cows and pigs and focus the business on the squab and poultry. An ad in the paper offered a bargain for the livestock.
All of us children helped prepare the birds for market. We twisted off their heads and pulled out their feathers. I could finish one in 5 minutes and got 25 cents an hour for my work. That's 2 cents a pigeon.
Life wasn't all work. Long Beach was a small seaside resort, and when summer came, so did visitors.
The 4th of July opened the tourist season, which for us meant a picnic on the beach, but we certainly weren't alone. Thousands showed up to celebrate.
We would take the big wagon so the whole family could fit, and we'd park in the sand, and those of us who could swim went down to the bathhouse to rent bathing costumes.
I remember my first 4th of July celebration. I was 5 and too young to swim, so I tucked up my skirts and dug clams out of the muck. Mother made a soup with them.
That was 1897. That's right. And it was also the year of the city's first beauty contest. Over 500 people gathered in the Methodist Tabernacle to witness the Carnival of Trades.
An enticing title for 30 young women who were dressed in costumes depicting the businesses they represented.
Miss Johnson won Queen of Trade, and all the contestants marched around the stage saluting her.
Who was Miss Johnson?
Oh, I don't remember.
The true highlight of the program was Mrs. Iva Tutt. She was the world's first female electrician and the manager of the city's electric light company. She wore a robe studded with incandescent lights, holding a staff topped with a small lamp. In my opinion, she should have been the winner.
None of my sisters participated.
Oh, what were we to do? Dress up as squab?
The fourth was a night for making noise. We lit firecrackers, which frightened my baby brother Frank.
Mother was quite annoyed with you, Tom.
Well, and Frank ended up being the head of Parks and Recreation, which now cares for this cemetery. Oh, Tom, tell these nice people about our horse.
Tommy was our plow horse and the animal who pulled the wagons when we wanted to go someplace that was too far to walk.
He was a nervous yet plodding animal. Slow was his usual speed, but any provocation could send him into a frenzied gallop. This was well documented by a group of girls riding in the Harnett wagon when he was bitten by a horsefly and took off running as their fancy bonnets flew into the air and landed in the dirt.
Another time, we decided to go cut wild violets with a neighbor. So we hitched Tommy to our wagon and went on our way to find the purple flowers. But on the way back, we decided to take a path alongside the railroad track. Suddenly, a train was headed straight for us, and we needed Tommy to get us to a clearing away from the track. We urged him to run, but he wouldn't. That train whistle sent him running, as we all screamed for our lives. Suddenly, he gets to a clearing, stops, bends his head down to eat the grass as that train roared by.
I'm surprised that horse didn't kill any of you girls.
I often tease Tom, telling him not to be so fussy about having so many sisters. Oh, I remember when you bought the mill.
Oh, yes, Tom, you were young, only 22. How did you know the mill would be successful?
Well, farmers needed to mill their grain. They needed feed, supplies, and equipment. In a couple of years, I'd saved enough to buy the business. I changed the name to the Long Beach Milling Company.
And you never married. I used to say he was wedded to his business, but I think his actual devotion was to Blackie, the cat.
There were sacks of grain stacked around a huge warehouse. One might assume that would bring rats and mice galore. Well, Blackie and his many descendants took care of this situation.
The cats entertained us all, and the warehouse workers supplemented the cats' rodent dinners with milk and other goodies.
Well, Tom and the cats kept the Long Beach Milling Company going for 57 years.
We have to talk about Bessie.
Stop.
Bessie graduated from a teacher's college while we were still living in England. When we arrived in Long Beach, she took some teaching jobs and started the history department when Poly High School opened. She was the one person in Long Beach qualified to do it.
And in 1915, she decided that Poly students would put on a history pageant.
We'd show the history of Long Beach, beginning with its Native American roots. I gave my students materials I had researched so they could write the script.
The student actors represented Native Americans, Spanish soldiers, sailors, friars, and caballeros from the days of Cabrillo, as well as later periods before the gold rush.
We used real sheep in the episode about sheep shearing on the Bixby Ranch. And the pageant closed with a representation of the progress of Long Beach with waves of the sea.
It was a 4-night exposition, with 1,200 Poly students at the center of it all.
More than 9,000 people attended. Well, that was a third of the city's population at that time.
Although Walter Case gets the credit.
That man.
Bessie was the first to chronicle the city's history. He picked up where she left off when she died.
That was sad. You died in 1918 of pneumonia. 4 days later, Father was killed by a hit-and-run driver. Then joined Caroline, who died in 1907 when the family stove exploded.
And on a happy note, we need to thank Ivy for her years chronicling our family's history. Today's stories come from her writings that were lovingly preserved by family and friends and then turned into a book. Thank you for listening and for supporting the Historical Society of Long Beach.